That was amazing. There was an old preacher joke about the preacher who came and said, before I preach, I want to say something. And that's kind of what I want to do today. Before I start the sermon, I want to say something. I just want to say what a delight it's been to be here with you these past few months in this change of season for you. I'm excited for this new season that you have. Next week, you've got Danny coming, and who's been off, and now she will be officially in a new role. And it feels like a new season coming, and it's just been delightful to be here and to be welcomed by your hospitality and your graciousness. It has been fun to be with you, whether it is in that room or this room or in the in-between rooms. It has just been lovely. So thank you. Forgiveness is the topic. I don't know of any topic that is the cause for more consternation and anxiety in churches than forgiveness. More so even than money, and that's saying something. I don't know of any topic where preachers have blundered in naively thinking they're going to answer everything, and it's a little like stomping through a minefield. They're just completely unaware of the hurts and the wounds of the people in front of them or what they're triggering. I don't know of any topic of Jesus that he commands more and that we want to listen to less. This is one of those topics that I have found every time I preach it that people always know who should hear this. They always say, boy, does my brother need to hear that one. Boy, does my friend need to hear that. Boy, does my wife really need to hear that one. But it's always amazing that the closer it is that we need to hear it, the harder it is for us to hear. And again, it's because we are stomping on holy ground. This is not just this big giant topic that's out there in theory. This hits pretty close to the heart of many of us in painful ways that maybe those around us don't even know. It's enough to say, why do we even bother? Let's just avoid the whole thing together. And we could, except, of course, this is one of the things that Jesus talks about almost constantly. You can't get away from it. Whether it's in the Beatitudes, whether it's in the Lord's Prayer that we're going to be saying again as we do every week here, whether it is in the parables or the teachings or in the apostles afterwards. This is pretty front and center. To avoid this one is to avoid the core of the gospel in so many ways. So, gently, intentionally, and with the confidence that the one who invites us to this topic is the one who's already there waiting for us in it. Let's see what God has for us today. And let's begin with what forgiveness isn't. Because I think that covers an awful lot of ground. And there is so much harm that has been done by the nonsense about what forgiveness isn't. And then that can clear away a lot of territory for us. So first, let's just say this. Forgiveness, of course, isn't the same as forgetting. You know, the old just forgive and forget. Doesn't work that way. You can't forgive what you've forgotten. And the whole point of forgiveness is those things, those wounds, those experiences that can't be forgotten. Neither is forgiveness about excusing. Let's just get on with it. Let's just move on. I don't know any teaching in churches that has been more hurtful and harmful to people than confusing these two. Oh, let's just move on beyond it. Let's just go. Let's just get back to normal. Let's pretend it didn't happen. Let's just take that person back even though they've abused you. Come on, let's just get beyond it. Can't we all just get along? This has been so wounding to so many people. today's passage. If there was ever any question about whether we should just get beyond it, today's passage would stop that one in its tracks. Jesus is spending this whole time, this rabbinical time, about what do you do when people keep hurting you? What if it's not just an event? What if it's a season of hurt and of wounding that continues? He doesn't say, oh, just get beyond it. There are some concrete steps that he goes through and says, well, this is what you do. And if there still isn't any response from the other person, then you do this. There's this proportional sense of accountability, even to the point of saying, and if they still don't get it, then you treat them like an enemy. You treat them like a tax collector or a Gentile. You push them outside of the realm of the boundaries of which who can hurt you. Now, then Jesus also says you still have to love your enemy, and that includes forgiveness, but it's done in a different context. It's not done that, well, you just have to hire that person back even though they have defrauded your company. Just get beyond it. It's not forgetting. It's not excusing. It's not reconciliation, reunion. There is this idea that, and the natural flow and the hope of forgiveness is that there is a reunion, a reconciliation, but it's not held hostage in case that other person doesn't want to acknowledge their part in this. Sometimes people say, I don't have to forgive because they haven't asked. Forgiveness can be one way. Reconciliation takes both. But the work of forgiveness can happen on its own. And forgiveness does not mean that justice is off the table. They're two works. They're two important works, and they hopefully work in tandem, but we're not saying this person is off the hook and unaccountable for what they have done. So if forgiveness isn't any of those things, then what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is first and foremost a process. It's not an on-off switch. It's more of a path. And depending on how deep the wound, it could be a lifelong path. Maybe in your own life, maybe people you know are having to work with the hurts they never deserved at the hand of someone or a group of others, and they are constantly having to work at this. And if that's you, just know you're walking familiar ground. And it is a walk. It is a path. It's not an on-off switch. And don't beat ourselves up because I can't just turn the switch and say I've forgiven and now it's done. There's a lot of books that have been written about it, a lot of sermons that have been preached about it. Maybe the wisest person I ever heard talk about it was a guy named Lou Smeets. Wrote a couple wonderful books. And this is how he put it, and I use this as the filter for myself. This is the lens through which how I figure out how we're supposed to approach forgiveness. And he says this, he says, forgiveness is the willingness to separate the wrong from the wrongdoer. Separate the wrong from the wrongdoer in order to see them afresh as one still worthy of love. In the Hebrew, in our Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, the word for forgiveness, literally the word picture of it is to set aside. And it's not setting aside as if this isn't important. No, it's terribly important, but we're taking it because if you and I have something between us, and it is this event, this hurt, this wound, I can't see you anymore. And in fact, all I can see in my rage and my hate and my hurt is this, and that I can't see you any other way. And it is taking that and setting it aside so that I can see you again. And by God's grace, maybe you can see me again. And we can begin to see each other as we truly are. We are broken. We are frail. We are fearful. We are capable of unspeakable hurt. And we are worthy of God's love. I can hate this event, I can name it. I can blame this person for it, because if I can't blame how can I forgive what I haven't blamed? But then once I've done that, to set that aside so that I can begin the possibility of seeing this person differently. Because hate blinds us. I can't see you if what I've got is this ball, this rage, this hate, and this hurt. I can't see you. And there's the possibility of seeing you differently. You may have seen the news from this past week of that horrific shooting in Maine. And I have to say in Maine, because if I said just the shooting, you'd say which one? The one in Maine, where a gunman took the life of 18 people. Shocked the entire community, of course. Didn't see it coming. And the rage and the hurt and the wound of it all, the anger of it all, the suspicion of it all. And then this week came the report that when they did an autopsy on the brain, and they found that the brain was showing incredible signs of damage. And I just want you to notice, I don't know what the connection is here, but I don't know if you noticed in you like it did in me. Suddenly by doing that, by setting that over here, saying, actually there's something going on maybe in the brain that might explain it, I found myself able to see this person differently. This wasn't a monster or just a monster. This is a person whose neurons had been scrambled and were no longer capable of the right pathways. This is a person who was suffering in ways that they didn't even know. They weren't just this sociopath. And we don't know. We don't know if that's the case. We don't know if that's the cause. And I'm not saying it is. What I want to say that this is an illustration of the shift that can take place when you can take that act and set it over here and begin to maybe see this person in a different way. Because when that happens, we have begun the work of forgiving. We know that the forgiveness is beginning to work when over time, when we can set that betrayal, that cruelty, that wrong. We know when we set that and it's beginning to work when I can not only begin to see this person, but I begin to find myself recalling them and wanting the best for them. I want to wish them well. Like the first signs of spring, with not complete flower, but things are starting to push through the ground. That's the sign that forgiveness and the work of forgiveness is beginning to have its effect. I mentioned Smedes in his book, and there's one quote that I wouldn't even try to paraphrase. He just says it so well. He says, if you cannot free people from their wrong and see them as the needy people they are, you enslave yourself to your own painful past. And by fastening yourself to the past, you let your hate become your future. You let your hate become your future. You can reverse your future only by releasing other people from their pasts. Forgiveness that can do that is a superpower. It can take that which there is nothing redeemable and somehow redeeming it anyway. It can take that which is pure pain and bringing out of that pain something new. It is a way of reclaiming our story. We are no longer just victims, something that happened to us. We are more than the worst that has happened to us. We are co-creators of our own future. And we create a whole nother range of possibility that did not used to exist. It is a superpower. And it's a superpower that no one wants. No one wants it because no one wants to have to be the one who's standing in the need to do that work. let alone the hard work that needs to be done. We would prefer to pass on this superpower. We would prefer to pass that there even needs to be it. But this is the world we live in, and these are the hurts we carry, and these are the wounds that we inflict on other people. And rather than being shackled to that, and to that wound and that hurt and that hate for the rest of our lives, there is a way, there is a superpower that helps release that and release us. There's a theologian you haven't heard of, I'm sure. His name is Jürgen Moltmann. If you have, don't mention it at a party. They'll just think you're a nerd. I will say that while most people haven't heard of it, most theologians have. And he is the author and the fountainhead, if you will, of some of the best theology of the last 50 years. It's amazing how many people have drawn from his insights. Jürgen Moltmann, German, at 17, as the war was coming to an end and they were desperate. I think he was 16 when they conscripted him, because that's where they were. They were pulling teenagers out and conscripted him into the German army. He was scared to death, as he said everyone was, and I did what most people did. Is the first chance they had, they looked for a soldier on the other side so they could turn themselves over to be a POW. And he did. He had no concept other than the nationalistic fervor that was behind the war. He had no concept of all that had gone on. And while he was as a prisoner of war and began to see not only his nation having completely collapsed, that he came to faith, not because he grew up in the church, he did not because he was spiritual, he wasn't, and not because his family was, they weren't. He came because in his desperation and his hopelessness, somebody gave him, a chaplain gave him a Bible with the Psalms, and where you and I might go to, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He zeroed in on the Psalms of lament, because that's where his heart was. My God, why have you forsaken me? He said, there, finally I found someone who can speak to where I'm at. But it wasn't just that. He talked about some Dutch soldiers who, as he was learning about faith and asking questions, who invited him out to a bridge one night. And they said, we see that you are wanting to be a Christian. So this is what we're going to do. We need to tell you all the wrongs that have been committed and how you and your people have hurt us. And they showed pictures and they told stories and they recounted the horrors of the war that he and his country had inflicted. And then they said, but because we are Christians, we set that aside. Not because it's wrong. Is it wrong? It is. But so that we can forgive you and love you. And that was the tipping point in his life. Someone who met him in that place of God-forsakenness, and then someone who met him with grace. And it changed his life, and it changed the course of everything that he did from there, as it does again and again with so many people who have that kind of an experience. It was embodied love. It was the miracle that God brings. Because what is the alternative? As hard as this is, as hard as this superpower is, we'd rather not do it. The alternative is to keep looking to vengeance and retribution as a way of evening the score and bringing peace. Hey, how's that working for us? It means there is no real resolution. There is no real peace, just a series of uneasy truces, whether it's halfway across the world or just across the dinner table. And it means that we commit ourselves to cycles of bitterness and hardness that sometimes go generations. And they never have an end. It is a stark choice that Jesus gives us. And so when Peter, who can't comprehend it all, still trying to quantify, but how many times that Jesus has to come back with his own answer. In other words, as many times as it takes. How healthy do you want to be? How whole do you want to be? How much do you want to understand the forgiveness in your own life? So this morning, I want to say this. I want to say, if you're one of those people here this morning who is saying, but you don't get it. It's different. I just can't forgive. I want to say, I understand. You didn't deserve this. And you don't. This isn't fair. But the only thing more unfair is the prospect of that pain controlling your life forever. And the invitation is not that we get to change our past, but that somehow there are things that we can do. We can do them that will help to heal the wound from our past. And it means opening ourselves up to the superpower of forgiveness, because it's God's. Because in the end, this isn't about us doing that. It's about allowing God to work in us and then through us. And when we do, it is like we have been given a key that will unlock the future. And that as we forgive, we set a prisoner free, only to find that the prisoner is us. And it's God who's walking out the door